First Contact's arrogance. Supreme Commander Nixval stood motionless before the holographic display, her iridescent scales shifting from deep purple to a contemplative blue as she studied the peculiar planet before her. Earth, as its inhabitants called it, hung like a marble of blue and white in the projection. The commander's secondary eyes blinked rapidly, processing the flood of data streaming in from the Zeth Empire's most advanced sensor arrays. Fascinating, she murmured, her voice carrying the characteristic harmonic overtones of her species. They've managed to achieve spaceflight without discovering quantum crystallization. How primitive. Science Officer Kazrem approached, his own scales a neutral gray. Supreme Commander, our analysis confirms it. They're still using chemical propulsion for their primary space vehicles. Their most advanced computers run on silicon semiconductors. They haven't even begun to harness zero-point energy. Nixval's scales rippled with amusement. And yet they've spread themselves across their solar system. Show me their defensive capabilities. The hologram shifted, displaying a network of satellites, space stations, and defense platforms orbiting Earth. Kazrem manipulated the display, highlighting various structures. Their weapons are primarily kinetic and nuclear-based. No particle beams, no quantum torpedoes. Their most advanced shields are magnetic fields designed to deflect radiation. They have approximately 3,000 military satellites, 200 orbital platforms, and a fleet of roughly 50 combat-capable spacecraft. Primitive indeed, Nixval said, but something in the arrangement of Earth's defenses gave her pause. They were positioned in unusual patterns, forming overlapping fields of fire that seemed to account for vectors of approach she wouldn't have considered. Have they detected us? Impossible, Commander. Our quantum cloak is generations beyond their detection capabilities. They're essentially blind to our presence. Nixval's scales shifted to a deeper blue. And yet they maintain combat patrols along vectors that would perfectly intercept our optimal attack corridors. Curious. Merely coincidence, Kazrem dismissed. Their civilization is barely 200 years into their industrial age. They still burn fossil fuels for energy. The resource wealth of their planet alone would fuel our empire's expansion for decades. Nixval moved closer to the hologram, examining the details of Earth's largest space station. The design was brutally utilitarian, lacking the elegant efficiency of Zeth architecture, yet something about it bothered her. Why do they have radiators that large on their stations? Their power generation shouldn't require such extensive heat dissipation. Perhaps inefficient design. Kazrem suggested. Their engineering appears to favor redundancy over efficiency. Most of their systems have multiple backups, often using completely different technological approaches to achieve the same function. Multiple solutions to the same problem, Nixval mused. Show me their ground-based defenses. The hologram shifted again, revealing a network of missile silos, radar installations, and anti-aircraft batteries. But what caught Nixval's attention were the numerous underground facilities, many of them appearing to serve no clear military purpose. They've buried much of their infrastructure, she noted, far deeper than necessary for protection against their own weapons. And these stockpiles. She gestured at various caches of resources scattered across the planet. They're preparing for something. Supreme Commander, Kazrem's scales flushed with embarrassment. Surely you're not suggesting these primitives could pose any real threat. Our smallest destroyer could neutralize their entire orbital defense network. Nixval's scales shifted to a warning red. Officer Kazrem, do you know why the Zeth Empire has survived for 10,000 years while other, more technologically advanced civilizations have fallen? Our superior tactical doctrine, Commander. No, because we learn from history. The Murish Confederation was destroyed by a species that hadn't even achieved faster-than-light travel. The hegemony of 7 suns fell to a race that still used projectile weapons. Her scales rippled with dark patterns. In both cases, the advanced civilizations failed to recognize that technological progression isn't always linear. Sometimes, a different path leads to unexpected advantages. But, Commander, our analysis is based on our understanding of technological development. These humans, she studied the hologram again. They've chosen a different path. Look at their history. They developed nuclear weapons before achieving spaceflight. They mastered miniaturization before discovering quantum mechanics. They built resilient systems using primitive components. What are you suggesting? Nick's Val's scales shifted to a deep violet, the color of strategic contemplation. I'm suggesting we proceed with caution. Prepare a full battle fleet, not just a conquest force. And most importantly, she turned all four eyes to fix Kazrem with an intense stare. Begin monitoring all frequencies, all spectrums. I want to know what they're hiding in those underground facilities. As you command, Supreme Commander. Kazrem's scales flushed with confusion as he hurried away. Alone again, Nixval studied the slowly rotating hologram of Earth. You've survived on a planet that should have killed you, she whispered. You've built a civilization in one of the most chaotic star systems I've ever seen. You're primitive, yes, but primitive isn't the same as simple. Her scales shifted to battle red. Show me what you're capable of, humans. Surprise me. The silent preparation. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the heart of Project Lighthouse, 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains. The massive underground chamber hummed with activity as engineers and scientists from every nation on Earth worked in unprecedented cooperation. On the central display, a real-time visualization showed what their visitors thought they were hiding so well. They're still watching us, she announced to the assembled team leaders. Still cloaked, still thinking we can't detect them. She allowed herself a small smile, still believing our radio telescopes are just for astronomy. General Marcus Rodriguez, commander of the United Earth Defense Force, stepped forward. His weathered face reflected decades of military experience, but his eyes sparkled with an almost childlike enthusiasm. How long until they realize their quantum cloak creates a distinctive gravitational signature? They won't, Dr. Chen replied confidently. They're too invested in their technological path. They've perfected quantum mechanics but seem to have completely ignored gravitational wave detection. To them, our LIGO networks look like primitive attempts to study black holes. The assembled leaders shared knowing looks. Humanity had learned long ago that there were many paths to the same destination. While the Zeth Empire had mastered quantum manipulation, humans had pursued other avenues of scientific discovery. Status report, Rodriguez commanded. Let's start with Project Faraday. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stepped forward, her holographic display showing a network of seemingly innocent communication satellites. The electromagnetic pulse grid is ready. The Zeth's quantum systems are incredibly sophisticated, but they're also incredibly sensitive. The moment they drop their shields to fire, they'll be hit with enough electromagnetic energy to fry every quantum circuit they have. They'll adapt quickly, Rodriguez warned. They'll try, Tanaka agreed. But their entire technological foundation is built on quantum computing. They don't have our experience with hardened electronics and analog backups. Every countermeasure they develop will make their systems more complex, more vulnerable. Project Thor. Colonel Wei Chang activated his display, showing a vast asteroid field between Mars and Jupiter. Ready and waiting. 5,000 asteroids, each equipped with our primitive nuclear pulse drives. The Zeth think they're just mining operations. They have no idea we can accelerate these rocks to relativistic speeds. Because they never developed nuclear pulse propulsion, Chen added. They went straight from chemical rockets to quantum drives. They don't understand how much raw power you can get from simple nuclear explosions. Rodriguez nodded grimly. And Project Lazarus. Dr. James O'Connor, his Irish accent thick with excitement, pulled up schematics of what appeared to be standard defense satellites. The honey trap is set. Our primitive orbital defenses are designed to fail spectacularly, creating clouds of debris. But each piece of debris contains a microscopic amount of antimatter. When their ships try to vaporize the debris with their energy weapons, the antimatter detonates, Rodriguez finished, turning their own weapons against them. They'll never see it coming, O'Connor confirmed. They think we're centuries away from antimatter production. They don't realize we found a different way to make it, one they never considered because they were too focused on quantum manipulation. Chen surveyed the room, feeling the surge of pride in human ingenuity. We've done in months what they thought would take centuries. Not because we're smarter, but because we think differently. We've had to be clever, had to find shortcuts and alternatives. Our entire history has been about turning weaknesses into strengths. Speaking of history, Rodriguez added, Project Alexandria is ready too. If everything else fails, if they manage to breach our defenses, every human settlement in the solar system is prepared to go dark. To revert to technology so primitive the Zeth won't even recognize it as technology. We'll hide in plain sight, rebuild, and strike back when they least expect it. A junior officer burst into the room, tablet in hand. General, the Zeth fleet is moving. 7 capital ships, dozens of support vessels. They'll be in strike range within 24 hours. Rodriguez looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each project leader. They're coming to conquer what they think is a primitive species. They're expecting an easy victory. Instead, they're going to learn why humanity has survived every catastrophe our world has thrown at us. We don't follow their rules. We don't think like they do. And that's our greatest strength. All projects on standby, he commanded. Let them make the first move. Let them think they have us outmatched. And when the moment comes, he smiled grimly. Show them exactly what primitive humans can do. Dr. Chen turned back to her gravitational wave display, watching the Zeth fleets approach. They were about to learn a lesson that Earth's history had taught humanity again and again. True intelligence isn't about having the most advanced technology. It's about using whatever tools you have in ways your opponent never imagined possible. The battle begins. Supreme Commander Nixval watched as her fleet dropped out of quantum space at the edge of the Sol system. Her scales had settled into a deep crimson, battle color. Behind her, the bridge crew of the dreadnought Eternal Dawn worked with practiced efficiency, their own scales shifting through shades of anticipation and controlled aggression. Launch the first wave, she ordered. Standard conquest protocol. Kazrem, now wearing the insignia of battle analyst, manipulated his console, deploying scout ships and electronic warfare platforms. Our quantum interference fields will disable their primitive communication networks within minutes. The smaller ships streaked ahead of the main fleet, their quantum drives leaving brief distortions in spacetime. On the main display, Earth's defensive grid appeared pathetically sparse compared to the approaching Zeth armada. Enemy response? Nixval inquired. Nothing yet, Kazrem reported, his scales flickering with confusion. Their satellites continue normal operations. Their ships remain in standard patrol patterns. It's possible they haven't even detected us. Something felt wrong. Nixval's commander's instincts, honed over centuries of warfare, screamed that this was too easy. Launch detection probes. Full spectrum analysis. The probes scattered across the solar system, their quantum sensors reaching out to analyze everything from electromagnetic radiation to subspace distortions. Data streamed back to the fleet. Commander, a sensor operator's scales flashed alarm yellow. Gravitational anomalies detected in the asteroid belt. Multiple objects are moving. Nixval leaned forward. Moving how? Accelerating, Commander. Thousands of asteroids, all accelerating toward our fleet's position. Current velocity, impossible. These readings must be wrong. Explain. The asteroids are approaching 0.15 T and still accelerating. But there's no energy signature we recognize. Just regular nuclear detonations behind them. They're using explosions for propulsion. Nixval's scales rippled with disbelief. They're throwing rocks at us. At relativistic speeds, her disbelief quickly turned to understanding. Evasive action. All ships, maximum quantum field dispersion. But the humans had calculated this too. As the Zeth ships engaged their quantum drives to dodge the asteroid barrage, Earth's primitive defense grid suddenly came to life. Not with weapons, but with an overwhelming burst of electromagnetic energy. Multiple systems failing. Kazrem shouted as displays flickered and died. Quantum field generators are overloading. We're losing. The electromagnetic pulse passed, but its effect on the Zeth's quantum technology was devastating. Ships tumbled out of formation, their delicate quantum systems scrambled by what the Zeth had dismissed as primitive radio technology. Status report. Nixval demanded. 60% of the fleet reporting quantum system failures. Gravitational sensors detect incoming asteroids have split into smaller projectiles. Impact imminent. Emergency protocols. All power to kinetic barriers. The space around the Zeth fleet erupted in light as energy shields strained to deflect the incoming relativistic projectiles. Ships twisted and turned, desperately trying to avoid the barrage. But the humans had planned for this too. As the kinetic barriers flared against the asteroid impacts, Earth's orbital platforms began to break apart. What appeared to be battle damage was actually a carefully choreographed dispersal of debris. Billions of tiny fragments, each carrying a microscopic payload of antimatter, spread across the battlefield. Enemy ships launching missiles, Kazrem reported, his scales now a sickly gray. Primitive nuclear weapons. Activating point defense systems. The Zeth fleet's energy weapons lashed out, vaporizing incoming missiles and debris alike. But as each piece of debris was destroyed, its antimatter payload detonated, creating a cascade of explosions that overwhelmed the already strained shields. How? Kazrem whispered as another destroyer succumbed to the onslaught. How are they doing this with such primitive technology? Nixval watched as her carefully planned conquest turned into chaos. The humans weren't fighting according to any doctrine she knew. They weren't trying to match Zeth technology. Instead, they had looked at what they had. Nuclear weapons, simple electromagnetics, basic physics, and found ways to make them devastating against a more advanced opponent. All ships, fall back to quantum point Sigma, she commanded. Prepare for. Her order was cut short as new alarms blared. The humans had launched their own ships, crude vessels by Zeth standards, but advancing with surprising speed and purpose. And behind them, more asteroids were accelerating to relativistic speeds, cutting off the fleet's retreat path. They're not primitive, Nixval realized, her scales shifting to the deep blue of revelation. They just took a different path, and we never saw it coming. Paradigm shift. General Rodriguez watched the tactical display as the Zeth fleet scattered, their formation broken by humanity's first wave of attacks. Around him, Project Lighthouse's command center thrummed with activity as data streamed in from sensors throughout the solar system. They're adapting faster than expected, Dr. Chen noted, studying the gravitational wave readings. They're modifying their quantum fields to resist our EMP attacks. Rodriguez nodded grimly. They would. You don't build an empire by being stupid. But every adaptation comes with a cost. He turned to Colonel Chang. Status of Project Thor. Second wave of kinetic strikes ready, sir. But they've adjusted their shield configurations. We won't catch them the same way twice. We don't need to, Rodriguez replied. Every time they strengthen their shields against kinetic impacts, they make themselves more vulnerable to other attacks. Dr. O'Connor, is Project Lazarus ready for Phase 2? The Irish scientist's hands danced across his console, ready and waiting. While they've been busy watching our asteroids, we've seeded their likely escape routes with our new toys. On the main display, the Zeth fleet was regrouping, their remaining ships forming a defensive sphere. Their quantum drives flickered uncertainly, damaged by the initial EMP burst, but gradually coming back online. They're going to try something desperate, Rodriguez predicted. Their entire military doctrine is based on technological superiority. We've just shown them that doctrine is flawed, and wounded animals are always dangerous. As if in response to his words, new energy signatures bloomed across the tactical display. The Zeth fleet was powering up weapons that had previously been dormant. Multiple quantum cascade initiators detected. A sensor operator reported. They're preparing to fire their main batteries. Dr. Chen's eyes widened. They're switching to their planet killer weapons, trying to end this quickly. Rodriguez allowed himself a small smile. Right on schedule. Dr. Tanaka, you're up. Across the solar system, humanity's true orbital defense grid revealed itself. What the Zeth had observed as simple communication satellites suddenly activated, creating an interlocking network of electromagnetic fields. Quantum cascade detected. The sensor operator called out. Multiple beams, targeting major population centers. The devastating weapons fired, each beam capable of reducing a city to atoms. But as they struck Earth's electromagnetic network, something unexpected happened. The beams bent. Quantum mechanics is all about probabilities, Dr. Tanaka explained, watching her years of work come to fruition. Their weapons work by collapsing quantum states in a specific way, but with the right electromagnetic fields. The quantum cascade beams curved through the carefully crafted magnetic fields, looping back into space, directly toward the Zeth fleet. Impossible. They heard Nixval's voice over an intercepted transmission. They're reflecting quantum weapons with primitive magnetic fields. All ships, emergency quantum jump. Now, O'Connor, Rodriguez commanded. As the Zeth ships engaged their quantum drives, they jumped directly into Project Lazarus's Phase 2. Thousands of tiny satellites, previously hidden in the debris field, activated. Each one generated a simple magnetic field, but together they created a quantum interference pattern that turned the Zeth's own jump attempts into a weapon. Ships emerged from quantum space at random points, their carefully planned escape routes disrupted by technology they had dismissed as too primitive to be a threat. Some reappeared inside their own fleet's formation, shields colliding with shields. Others found themselves jumping repeatedly, trapped in a magnetic web that turned their quantum drives against them. Their quantum drives are burning out, Chen reported, watching the gravitational signatures fluctuate wildly. They're going to have to shut them down or risk complete system failure. Rodriguez turned to his command staff. This is the moment of truth. They're about to realize they can't retreat. They can't use their most powerful weapons. They're trapped in our solar system with what they thought was a primitive species. Sir, a communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the Zeth flagship. They're requesting a temporary ceasefire. The command center fell silent. On the main display, the once mighty Zeth fleet hung motionless, their quantum drives dark, their advanced weapons rendered useless by what they had dismissed as primitive technology. Put them through, Rodriguez ordered. It's time to show them that humanity isn't just creative in war. Dr. Chen, begin transmitting the full technical package we prepared. Let's show them exactly how primitive humans developed gravity wave detection, antimatter production, and electromagnetic field manipulation. Are we sure about this? Colonel Chung asked. Sharing our technology with an enemy. Rodriguez smiled. We're not sharing technology, Colonel. We're sharing knowledge, understanding. They thought technology only progressed in one direction, their direction. Let's teach them about the countless paths to the same destination, and why underestimating someone because they took a different path is the last mistake an empire should make. Evolution of war. Supreme Commander Nixval stood in Project Lighthouse's main conference chamber, her scales shifting through shades of blue and green as she studied the holographic displays. Around her, human scientists explained concepts that challenged everything she thought she knew about technological progression. You see, Dr. Chen was saying, we didn't ignore quantum mechanics. We just approached it differently. While your civilization focused on manipulating quantum states directly, we explored the relationship between quantum mechanics and gravity. Nixval's secondary eyes blinked rapidly. But gravity is such a weak force compared to quantum interactions. We dismissed it as irrelevant to advanced technology. Exactly, General Rodriguez said. Just like you dismissed chemical rockets as primitive compared to quantum drives. But that assumption blinded you to the potential of nuclear pulse propulsion for achieving relativistic speeds. And this is why you succeeded where other species failed against us, Nixval realized. You didn't try to match our technology. You found ways to use fundamental physics against us. The displays showed the aftermath of the battle. The once mighty Zeth fleet floated powerless, their quantum systems shut down to prevent complete burnout. But rather than destroying the disabled ships, human vessels were approaching them with offers of aid and scientific exchange. Your electromagnetic defense grid, Nixval continued, her scales rippling with newfound respect. It wasn't just about disrupting our quantum systems. You actually understood quantum mechanics well enough to redirect our weapons using magnetic fields. Dr. Tanaka nodded. We had to. Earth's magnetic field has been protecting us from solar radiation for billions of years. We learned to work with what we had, to understand it deeply rather than seeking shortcuts to more advanced technology. And your antimatter production. Kazrem, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. You found a way to create it using particle accelerators rather than quantum extraction. Slower, less efficient, but harder to detect, O'Connor finished. And more stable in small quantities. Perfect for weaponization, if needed. Nixval turned to Rodriguez. You could have destroyed our entire fleet. Why offer a ceasefire? The general's expression was firm but not unkind, because humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our creativity. It's our ability to learn from others and teach what we know. We've spent our history fighting each other, yes, but we've spent even more time figuring out how to live together despite our differences. Your species is young, Nixval observed, barely space-capable by our standards. And yet we defended ourselves against your empire, Rodriguez said. Not because we're superior, but because we're different. We took a different path, asked different questions, found different solutions. Dr. Chen brought up a new display, showing the technical package they had prepared. This is everything we know about gravity wave detection, electromagnetic field manipulation, and our approach to quantum mechanics. In exchange, we'd like to learn about your quantum drive technology. You're offering an exchange of knowledge. After we tried to conquer you, we're offering a chance to learn from each other, Rodriguez corrected. Your empire has existed for 10,000 years. Imagine what you could discover if you looked at problems from a new perspective. And imagine what humanity could achieve with access to your quantum technology. Nixval's scales shifted to deep violet, the color of decision. The Empire won't like this. We've always believed in technological superiority through conquest. That maybe it's time for the Empire to evolve, Rodriguez suggested, just as war has evolved. The old model of technological supremacy died today, but something new can take its place. A partnership, Nixval said slowly, not between primitive and advanced species, but between civilizations that took different paths to the same stars. Around them, human and Zeth scientists were already gathering in small groups, sharing ideas and perspectives. Each discovery by one team led to new insights for the other. The quantum physicists were especially excited, realizing that their different approaches to the same fundamental forces could complement each other in ways neither side had imagined. This is how humanity survived everything our world threw at us, Rodriguez explained, not by being the strongest or most advanced, but by learning, adapting, and working together. We'd like to extend that same principle to the stars. Nixval's scales settled into a new color, one she had never displayed before, a shimmer of gold and blue that reflected both hope and understanding. Perhaps, she said, this is what it truly means to be advanced. Not the path you take, but your willingness to learn from the paths others have taken. As if to emphasize her words, a new alert appeared on the main display. the first successful test of a hybrid dry system, combining Zeth quantum technology with human gravitational wave manipulation. It was crude, experimental, but it represented something unprecedented. Two different approaches to science working together to create something neither civilization could have achieved alone. "And so the real evolution begins," Rodriguez said softly. "Not of war, but of peace. Not of conquest, but of cooperation." The future that opened before them was uncertain, but it was filled with possibilities that neither humans nor Zeth had imagined before this day. They had learned that true advancement comes not from following a single path, but from understanding that there are countless paths to the same destination, and that sometimes the ones that seem most primitive might lead to the greatest discoveries of all.